Forget the brightly lit tents of traveling circuses. Forget the painted banners of 19th century freak shows where men on stilts paraded before gullible crowds to the sound of brass bands. The greatest and most unsettling mystery of human history does not live in the realm of folklore, myth, or theatrical illusion. It lives in the dark, suffocating dust of the Appalachian Mountains. It lives in the grueling, brutal reality of coal mining camps between the 1880s and the 1910s. Close your eyes and imagine the biting cold of a gray mountain morning in West Virginia or Kentucky. Smell the acrid scent of black powder, sulfur, and sweat. Listen to the deafening, rhythmic strike of iron against ancient stone. This was a world of absolute, unforgiving pragmatism. In the coal camps, there was no room for fantasy. You either moved rock or you starved. And it is precisely here, in the most mundane, economically driven, and heavily documented industrial environment of early America, that the official narrative of human history begins to collapse under its own weight. The crack in the facade begins in the quiet, temperature-controlled rooms of state historical archives and the private records of old British investment firms. If you dig through the endless boxes of tedious labor reports and mine production logs, you will eventually find them. The glass plate negatives. Heavy, fragile pieces of history, coated in silver gelatin, capturing a world in stark black and white. At first glance, the photographs are remarkably ordinary. They show mining crews pausing in the middle of their grueling shifts. Men covered in thick layers of coal soot, wearing heavy canvas clothes, their faces hardened by exhaustion. They wear the standard soft caps fitted with small, dripping carbide lamps. But as your eyes adjust to the image, a deep cognitive dissonance takes hold. Your brain struggles to process the geometry of the scene. Standing shoulder to shoulder with men of average height, casually leaning against wooden shoring timbers, are individuals of incomprehensible scale. Men standing anywhere from 9 to 11 feet tall. They are not framed as anomalies. They are not positioned in the center like sideshow attractions. They are standing in the back row or leaning against a cart, holding their tools, looking into the lens with the exact same weary, dead-eyed stare as the normal-sized men beside them. The shock of these images lies entirely in their normalcy. There is no fanfare. There is only a group of laborers, some of whom happen to be giants, captured in the mundane reality of their daily grind. The immediate, defensive instinct of the modern mind is to scream that this is a trick. Our conditioning is so profound that we immediately look for the comforting excuse of photographic manipulation. We tell ourselves it must be forced perspective. We tell ourselves it must be a camera trick, a double exposure, a flaw in the old lenses. But the cold, hard mathematics of the photographs refuse to let us look away. These are not isolated portraits against blank backgrounds. These men are standing in complex environments filled with objects of standardized, fixed dimensions. The wooden support beams, the steel rails on the ground, the specific gauge of the coal carts. When you measure the tall men against these fixed reference points, the perspective remains flawless. Furthermore, their bodily proportions are entirely normal. They do not exhibit the heavy, distorted facial features, the elongated jaws, or the debilitating bone structures associated with medical gigantism or acromegaly. They are perfectly proportioned human beings, simply scaled up to a massive, impossible size. But photographs, no matter how geometrically sound, can always be dismissed by those who desperately wish to sleep soundly at night. So, let us leave the archives. Let us look at the physical, tangible world. Let us look at the iron and the wood that history cannot sweep under a rug. If you travel deep into counties like Mingo or Harlan, and you know exactly which forgotten scrapyards and private local collections to visit, you will find the tools. Not legends of tools, but heavy, rusted, physical objects that defy the mechanical capabilities of an ordinary human. Consider the standard miner's pickaxe, a heavy iron head mounted on a sturdy hickory handle, designed to fit comfortably within the closed grip of an average man. Now, imagine holding a pickaxe recovered from these specific, older mine shafts. The iron head is terrifyingly massive, carrying chemical residues of ancient black powder and decades of use. But it is the handle that shatters the illusion of normality. The circumference of the wooden shaft is so incredibly thick that a normal 6-foot-tall man cannot close his fingers around it. You cannot swing a heavy tool efficiently or safely for 12 hours a day if you cannot grip the handle securely. These tools were not ceremonial. They are blackened with sweat, coal dust, and the undeniable friction of brutal daily labor. They were built for hands twice the size of yours. The ergonomic nightmare for the skeptics only deepens when we examine the coal carts. In the era before widespread mechanization, these heavy iron carts, loaded with tons of rock and coal, had to be pushed out of the dark by sheer human strength. Biomechanics dictate that to push a massive weight, the push bar must be positioned around the height of the worker's hips or lower abdomen, allowing them to lean their body weight forward and drive with their legs. In the scrapyards of Appalachia, there remain rusted skeletons of minecarts from the 1890s featuring heavy pushing bars welded at heights that would hit an average man squarely in the chest or throat. If a normal worker attempted to push a fully loaded cart from that height, the sheer leverage against his spine would destroy his lower back within a week. Yet, these carts show signs of heavy, continuous use. They possess the exact, perfect biomechanical design to be pushed from the hip by a man standing 10 feet tall. And then, there is the architecture. The earth itself bears the scars of their existence. The coal operators of the late 19th century were famously, viciously greedy. They paid their workers in company scrip, worthless outside the camp, to recoup every possible penny. They forced men to buy their own tools and explosives. In this environment of ruthless penny pinching, a mine operator would never spend a single unnecessary dollar on labor or dynamite. Yet, scattered across the Appalachian ridges are abandoned mine portals excavated to heights of 8 or 9 feet, explicitly carved to access coal seams that were only 4 or 5 feet thick. Why would a greedy corporation pay to blast and haul away 4 feet of useless, solid bedrock above the coal? The answer is as simple as it is terrifying. Because the men extracting the coal physically needed the clearance to walk into the mountain. This hidden architecture extends beyond the dark of the mines and into the daylight of the most remote company towns. Deep in the forgotten hollers, miles away from the main settlements, one can still find the rotting remains of specific company boarding houses. Buildings constructed with a baffling, eerie scale. Solid oak doors standing a full 10 feet tall, ceilings soaring to 12 or 14 feet in simple, utilitarian sleeping quarters. Raised sleeping platforms built so high off the floor that a normal man would need a step stool to reach them. The physical environment was quietly, efficiently adapted to accommodate a workforce of staggering size. The true horror of this story, however, is not that these 10-foot men existed. The true horror lies in how the official institutions treated them. There was no grand conspiracy of silence in the beginning. There were no men in black suits threatening witnesses. There was only the cold, mechanical machinery of industrial bureaucracy. When you read the federal records from the era, the hair on the back of your neck will stand up, not because of what they reveal, but because of how casually they reveal it. Take the 1903 field report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics concerning operations in McDowell County. In a tedious 50-page document detailing tonnage, ventilation, and wage disputes, the federal inspector notes, in a brief and clinical paragraph, the presence of laborers of unusual stature. The report does not express awe. It does not call for scientific investigation. It simply notes that these massively built men are particularly effective in heavy extraction and the manual clearing of slate falls. 4 years later, an internal corporate survey conducted by Inland Steel in 1907 catalogs several photographs of these mixed-height crews. The accompanying corporate notes do not describe a miraculous discovery. They merely calculate the caloric needs and the customized equipment costs for the larger workers, comparing their daily tonnage output to the smaller men. To the capitalists and the federal bureaucrats of the time, a 10-foot-tall human being was not a biological marvel to be studied. He was simply a machine that required a bigger shovel and could move more rock. They normalized the impossible. They stripped the giants of their wonder and reduced them to entries on a ledger. But then comes the turning point. The silent, abrupt vanishing that transforms this historical curiosity into a chilling mystery. As the Progressive Era marched forward, moving past 1912 and into 1913, the coal mines fell under intense, increasing scrutiny. Labor unions began to rise. Federal oversight tightened. Documentation, photography, and standardized record-keeping became the absolute norm across the industry. And precisely at this moment, when the lights of bureaucratic observation burned their brightest, the giants simply vanished. After 1913, they disappear entirely from the photographic record. They vanish from the payroll ledgers. They evaporate from the federal inspection reports. The sudden absence is deafening. Some historians, when forced into a corner about the earlier records, will lazily wave their hands and claim that mechanization replaced manual labor. But this is a desperate, easily disproven lie. Brutal, manual labor continued in those specific Appalachian mines for decades after 1913. Men continued to swing picks and push carts well into the 1930s. But the 10-foot men were gone. There was no public outcry. There was no documented mass exodus. There were no sensational headlines about the last giants leaving the mountains. They were simply erased, swallowed by the very history they helped excavate. This brings us to the most painful realization of all, the realization of how modern history maintains this erasure today. We do not need a shadowy cabal to hide the truth when we have the suffocating blanket of academia. Today, highly educated historians and museum curators can look at a massive, rusted pickaxe that breaks every rule of human ergonomics, and without a second thought, they will label it a manufacturing anomaly. They will look at 10-foot doors in a ruined boarding house and classify them as architectural eccentricities. They look at clear, pristine glass plate negatives of towering men, and rather than question their textbooks, they blindly trust their textbooks and declare the photographs a hoax. We erased these giants not with fire and not with violence, but with a systemic, institutional incuriosity. We decided that it was simply easier to categorize physical, undeniable evidence as an anomaly than it was to rewrite the established narrative of human evolution and history. The silence was deafening, and we welcomed it. There is one specific photograph that haunts the archives. Taken just after the turn of the century, it captures a shift change near the mouth of a dark, yawning mine portal. The morning light catches the swirling coal dust in the air. Stepping out of the darkness is one of the massive men. He must be 10.5 feet tall, his face blackened, his shoulders slumped with the crushing exhaustion of a 12-hour shift. In front of him walks a man of average height, maybe 5'8". As they walk toward the camera, The giant raises his massive, soot-stained hand and rests it casually, gently, on the smaller man's back. It is a gesture of profound, quiet humanity, a gesture of exhausted camaraderie between two men who have just survived another night in the dark together. He was not a monster. He was not a myth. He was a co-worker. He was a human being who bled, sweat, and toiled in the dirt to build the industrial foundation of a nation. And then he was deleted, wiped away because he did not fit into the neat, tidy little boxes of modern science. As you look around at the world today, at the museums, the textbooks, and the unquestioned narratives handed down by authorities, let that image burn into your mind. Let the sheer weight of that rusted, oversized pickaxe weigh heavy on your conscience. Because if institutions are willing to look at a 10-foot man standing in broad daylight and collectively agree that he does not exist, what else have we silently agreed not to see?